listening to the 14th Source for all geeky nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses. In the episode for Friday, July 7th, 2023, we've survived. I will say we've survived. Other people may not say this, but I will say I've survived another 4th of July. But that's only because I have a dog. And we did it. We made it through another year. And it was literally just at the cost of driving hundreds of miles.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. Actually, I'm to the point where, I've seen, comics and stuff of people joking about their dogs and their dog's reaction to fireworks. And quite frankly, at this point, I think about my reaction.
Honestly,
and
right?
As
a veteran?
just like, so then what do we, well, I'm not that kind of veteran, but I don't like them. I don't know friends who really get excited about it.
Right. Aren't we kind of over fireworks at this point?
And honestly, the number of like street fireworks, like people that just like, hey man, I bought some shit, let's blow it up. Like, no, let's not.
Right.
Like, it would be one thing if it were just the one event, like the one,
Right.
organized by society event. But like, I still think of years ago, almost 20 years ago, when I lived in Silverdale, Washington, and the idea that it was late at night, the sun had set. I had the blinds to the living room window open, and the room was lit with people outside in the townhouse community lighting shit off. Like, it was like, oh,
right.
Wow, it's like, it's a war zone in here,
Right. And like, the reason why I bring that up is because my dog, and I guess by proxy, myself and my wife, suffered a traumatic event back in 2018. Basically, we had to walk 3 blocks in the dark, surrounded by fireworks, street fireworks going off, and my dog was like, I don't know what's happening. And so ever since then, we have made strides to go where fireworks are not during 4th of July. And so we actually, at the end of, for 4th of July, we actually found a town on coastal California that had banned fireworks in order to get away from fireworks. And it's a town that banned fireworks because, being a coastal town, fireworks upset the local seabirds that nest there. So I'm like, you know what? I don't care about the reason, but thank God for those seabirds. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Well, I'm actually shocked that the Washington State Department of Natural Resources or whatever
right.
actually did a post like, hey, man, 5 fires started last weekend. All 5 were from fireworks.
Have you seen Canada lately?
Right. And it just becomes this thing where, to me, there's no justification. Like, no. It's not actually that fun. It's just shit exploding.
It's like St. Patrick's Day is just an excuse for public alcoholism. 4th of July is just an excuse for public pyromania at this point. And not actually a celebration of anything valid.
Right. Just blowing shit up.
Right. And so what we want to do is yearn for a future utopia where we can all be in sync and live in a post-scarcity world, which, thank God, we have a model called Star Trek, Andrew.
Right.
And even better.
How is your Star Trek adventure going?
Well, we're working our way. I think we're almost done with... it feels like it's taken forever, but we're almost done with Season 2 of Deep Space Nine. And we will say this is a quick check-in. Deep Space Nine fucking slaps. It's a great show. Great show. We finally got an actual... one episode, we got a true glimpse of Cisco. I'm like, this is what I'm looking forward to. And but generally speaking, they've been doing no wrong. But the more exciting thing, aside from them canceling and deleting shows from their network or their streaming platform, which there's a whole news section to be dedicated to that shit. But just generally, not just with Paramount Plus, but
with
everybody.
everyone. Like it's the new model.
We've already talked about it. Like that's the thing with the whole Willow purge, right? Yeah. But like it's just still going on.
Star Trek purge.
Yeah,
but anyway.
we talked. Yeah. But new things are still dropping. New things that people seem to be liking, and therefore the streaming service is supporting. Star Trek: Strange New Worlds Season 2. Andrew is, as of this recording, 4 episodes deep. However, as of this release, it's 4 episodes deep. As of this recording, it's 3 episodes deep.
Yeah.
And but dude, what 3 episodes we have received from that show. And so I guess we should say before we go any further, spoilers. Although I don't think we're going to go too deep. It's mostly just us reacting and being fanboys.
Right.
But spoilers for the first 3 episodes of Star Trek: Strange New Worlds Season 2.
Yes.
Because they're coming out swinging from the premiere.
They're actually like it just, every episode I'm like, wow, that's really good. And I will actually say this is a bit of a, outside of the confines of the conversation, but knowing that there are future episodes, which I'm excited about.
We've been very clear about that.
Well, I mean, like episode 7, the crossover with Lower Decks, but also to see the various cast members talk about like, but then there's also episode, I think 8 or 9, which for which nothing is known. Okay. But they all say like, "Oh man, this is our big swing." And I'm like, wait, that's your big swing?
Which is also great because it's a 10-episode season, right?
Right,
and like,
it's 10 episodes.
It's great because that means every episode matters, and that's a conversation we could have outside of this. Of like shorter seasons makes the episodes themselves so much more impactful. Something that kind of I think we have probably touched on before, mostly with regards to like Doctor Who or the Marvel shows, because they've tended to be shorter, right?
In contrast with older shows.
Like I said, it's taken us like 7 months to get through Star Trek Season 2, Deep Space Nine, right?
Right. And so I've been rewatching some old shows, and it's always like, oh, wow, 24 episodes, And there's a lot of times where you're like, oh, this was what we call a filler.
Well, well, honestly, like understanding like how many episodes are per season is a big indicator of whether we should rewatch a show. And it's like, well, should we start with season 3 or something like that, right? Because it's just such a commitment. But again, that's a story for a different day, and actually a conversation we probably already had at this point, being nearly 10 years into the show. But the nice thing is that Stranger Worlds, so far at the very least, has wasted no time with just kind of getting to the meat and importance of what Star Trek is about, and especially with what this show is about, being sort of a fun, episodic exploration of what I guess Star Trek started as being, right? Just sort of this idea of cultural exploration through the guise of a science fiction show.
Yes.
So how has that played out so far? How have they kept that mission, for lack of a better word, going in the first 3 episodes of season 2?
So, as you said, as of right now, they have 3 episodes. As of this recording, we've seen 3 episodes, and it's actually interesting. I was thinking about like, what do I say? I was like, well, the first episode was fine.
We got a Captain Light episode,
and then the second episode is like, oh, that's one of those episodes people talk about. It's the lawyer episode that people write about for years. Right,
we got the trial episode,
the trial episode, and then the third episode, I was like, okay, well, that was a big episode. Number 2, number 3 was like, oh, but wait, let's do another big episode that people I've seen some people refer to. I don't know if I agree, but it's the City on the Edge of Forever. It's the big. Kind of time travel with a hard choice about time and love and what matters,
right?
And family, and I'm just like, wow. So of the first 3, the first one, I'm actually looking back like, oh, first episode. I'm so sorry that you had to be followed by the two bangers, right?
Right. I mean, the first episode, in a lot of ways, kind of felt like, hey, remember Klingons as you know them?
Right, and it had, you know, of the three, the first episode was definitely the one that felt the most like, we have to set some stuff up. We have to, you know, build our world. We have to introduce a new character. We have to, you know, establish some kind of ideas while touching on other stuff and bringing the team back together because some other characters had wandered off.
Well, yeah, it was a utilitarian episode because Captain Pike, and you told me this afterwards, the actor was not available.
Right. Anson Mount, they knew he would be unavailable as he had a child. Mm-hmm. So they planned for that.
Right. So otherwise known as, Blackagar Boltagon. What the fuck his name was from the Eternals?
Oh.
He's Black Bolt. He has some bullshit names.
No, not yeah. But either way, so, you know, they knew they wouldn't have the lead, so they didn't start with, you know, the second episode because that would have been the natural big lead, right? Like, hey, how do we wrap up the big shocker at the end of season 1? Oh, let's skip that and do a romp.
Which, ironically, is they do come, like, it's not him, but his in a sense, his relationship or his personal life is at the center, kind of episode 2.
Right. Yeah.
With the trial episode.
So I think, yeah, so they had these first 3 episodes. I think to me, the first one was the one that definitely felt like maybe it was, I mean, it was fine. I enjoyed it.
It was great. It was a lot of fun.
But it didn't, like, again, just the idea that the next 2 episodes are like, well, let's punch heavy, right?
Right.
I almost feel bad for the 4th episode. It's like, hey, man, you had two heavy episodes. Let's do a romp.
Or honestly, whatever. Like, it's well welcomed at that point, right?
Right.
Because those episodes 2 and 3 are super heavy. But I think, especially with the episodes 2 and 3 kind of get to, and what you're hinting at, and what you've actually explicitly said here, is something that I want to speak to because I don't think I've talked about it since I've done it, but in anticipation of season 2, we rewatched season 1 of Strange New Worlds, which is interesting because of my progression through Star Trek. When I watched season 1 originally, and my context within Star Trek is very different than when I watched it through the second time. I have much more Star Trek under my belt, and that combined with the excitement of it being new, being there when sort of Strange New Worlds landed. While I enjoyed the show the first run through, part of me kind of dismissed Strange New Worlds season 1 because I'm like, oh well, you know, they're working with a lot of elements here that they have to balance of like the original show of kind of what Next Generation established with sort of the redefinition of what Star Trek was with the movies, you know, the Kelvin universe, right?
Right.
And so I'm like, okay, it's to me, God, I hate to say this out loud, but there's a part of me in the back of my brain is like, oh, this is fun, fake Star Trek. But then when I watched it through the second time, I had finished The Next Generation, had waded into the waters of Deep Space Nine, and the excitement to an extent had worn off. So I could actually appreciate that show that's 10 episodes on their own merits with the kind of the intrinsic elements of what Star Trek is having settled in the back of my brain. Mm-hmm. And I came out of that second watch through going like, holy shit, this is like Star Trek. This is capital S, capital T Star Trek. It's really good. And I'm really glad I went through and watched it the second time because I either missed or dismissed a lot, to my shame. And so I guess I'm saying that publicly here on the record, saying like, I am sorry, Strange New Worlds. But it's that second watch through really kind of elevated my expectations for season 2. And with that in mind, everything we said, those first 3 episodes definitely meet those expectations in a lot of ways. Both on like base levels and at sort of like more progressive, interesting experimental levels, right? Because of it, like there's a trial episode, which is kind of a trope. There's the time travel / dimensional hopping kind of angle, which is a trope, but they do interesting things with it.
Yes.
And especially in a 2023 kind of way.
Well, and they take the tropes of, especially tropes of Star Trek, and they define them in their own way for this show.
So what's one way they do that?
Yeah. Well, so like, for example, the trial episode, right? Trial episodes, let's see, original series had the Menagerie Part 1 and 2.
Right.
TNG had the Measure of a Man. DS9 has...
Oh, no, there was one early on. Yeah.
But there's a few others.
Sure. We've established the pattern by this point.
Right. So it's a standard kind of thing they do. And so they're like, let's do it, but not like do something like punch hard with it. Right. Like I feel like people talk about the Measure of a Man, which is the TNG one about where the idea that Starfleet wants to basically seize data as property. Because they want the character. They want to make not data.
They want to seize data.
They want to make more androids. So in order to do that, they have to take control of him.
Right, and basically disassemble him. And there's the guy saying like, "Oh, he's just a machine. We can learn. We can benefit more by taking him apart." Right.
So that episode is often cited both as being like a rock and trial episode, but also like it has some really big moments.
Yeah, it's an incredible episode.
Including the one where Guinan, who I believe is actually relatively new at the series.
Yeah.
Season 3. So, but like Picard goes to her and she basically gives him I mean, I'm going to summarize it. This is fucking slavery, man. Right? Like she couches it as like, oh yeah, this is the idea that someone's more valuable as property than as a person. Yeah. Gosh, where have I heard that before? Whoopi Goldberg being like, man, was I in The Color Purple? Being like, man, was LeVar Burton in Roots? Just. I mean, I say that as a joke, but like, that was the whole point, right? It was like, hey, man, we've heard this before, and we know how it ends. And honestly, Ad Aspera something to the stars through hardship. That's the English version. To the stars through hardship. It is the same thing. Like, and it is actually, it's multiple flavors of that same thing, but it is that that thing. But then also like, but here's the new version for now, right?
Ad astra per aspera.
Right. We've heard the this is slavery version.
Yeah.
Now it's like it's the exclusion of people based on who they are. Right. Like it is. And the thing is, it's everything from you don't count because you're brown. You don't count because you're Asian. You don't count because you're gay. You don't count because you're like, it's all those things.
But also, and this is where kind of the metaphor gets a little muddy. It's like they're saying that because the person on trial, right? Number one, Chin Riley? Is that her name?
Una Chin Riley, yeah.
Una Chin Riley.
Number one, yeah.
Yeah, I still feel guilty that there's some characters whose names I don't know because I know them by other names. Like their position specifically. She's an augment, right? She's a
Illyrian, so she's genetically augmented.
Right.
Because
which makes her stronger, faster, better, right?
I mean, ish. Yeah. That's what Illyrians do. Rather than adapt a planet to suit them, they adapt to suit the planet.
Right. Which in other contexts makes them stronger, more powerful, quote unquote better, right?
It's more that Earth has a history with people using genetic augmentation, to be stronger, faster, better,
because of the war.
Right. It's not actually it has nothing to do with what Illyrians do per se. It's the fact that this on its face is forbidden because we have this bad history of it.
Right. 'Cause it's the eugenics war, right?
Yeah.
Is that what they call it? Which is World War III. Do they have? which ostensibly ends the world as they know it, right?
I mean,
I'm speaking out of turn.
You've seen Star Trek First Contact. You've seen what the world looks like.
Yeah.
It looks like...
James Cromwell has a cool hat.
Yeah, and that's all he has. That's the problem.
Well, he's a spaceship. He's working on it.
Yeah, repurposed nuclear missile.
right. So yeah, and so that's kind of the basis of it. And it reminds me of a couple things, right? Like, it reminds me, one, of the obscure 90s cartoon, Exo Squad. But it also reminds me of, look it up, it reminds me of the X-Men, because everything reminds me of the X-Men.
Of course.
In its own kind of way, right? But that's kind of where the metaphor, like, oh, this represents maybe LGBTQ people, right? But it's like, but also like they can break a normal human being in half, right? So it's kind of like the Sokovia Accord problem in a lot of ways. But the actual message there, and I bring that up because that's the normal argument people bring up when they talk about the X-Men. It's like, or what was brought up in Civil War, right? Avengers Civil War, which is like, well, yeah, but they are superheroes. But yeah, but you know, that's not the point. The point is like restricting, controlling, prohibiting people based simply on who they are. That's a powerful metaphor, right?
It is. And I want to address that real quick.
Yeah.
Because I think what Strange New Worlds does that distinguishes from that concern is that Illyrians on their face are not actually like superheroes. They're not strong. They're not fast. I mean, the one thing that we see of Una Chin Riley is that she has basically like an ability to heal faster. But even in that episode, we see it's not that great. It's good enough.
Oh, so she's like Wolverine when he first appeared, rather than what we got.
Rather than Wolverine, where he regrows a skeleton. Right. So it is this idea that. But that's not the concern. It's not that Illyrians are a little bit different. It's that there's a blanket ban on that. And I think...
Remember these people tried to kill everybody, right?
With the understanding that, like, well, but we had a bad history of it. It's like, I think the comparison would be, well, we banned, mutants because a mutant once did a terrible thing. Even though, like, we give no consideration to what you, the mutant, does. Mm-hmm. We just say, "Gosh, you're all forbidden," which I think it's. I would argue that it's done in that context to make it even more, to highlight the narrative more, to make it more preposterous. Like, your blanket ban forbids even people that, while genetically augmented, were like. I mean, really, you could argue to cure a cancer. Or to whatever, like that's technically forbidden,
right?
Which is, I think, I want to make that distinction because it isn't like Una Chin Riley's not going to crack someone in half next episode, right?
Well, she fucking could.
No, she couldn't. I mean, well, she could because she's Mystique, but not because she's an Illyrian.
She can crack me in half.
So I want to make that distinction because I think it's important, and they even emphasize the fact that it really was like we're not that different. You or I. Not that I'm an Illyrian, but you get the point.
Not yet. So the question I had coming out of that, coming to you, my Star Trek reference here, and the official Star Trek expert among the podcast.
Yes.
The question I had coming out is that how directly has the show, movies, whatever, any aspect of the continuity, how directly have they addressed the eugenics wars previously? Or has it just been something they've dashed off as
So what show are you
happened?
watching?
Uh-oh. Deep Space Nine.
So...
is that going to be the answer to every question I have?
So what I will say is that the idea behind this episode, which actually is why I will say, for those that don't know, this episode didn't resolve anything. Like, it didn't feel like the Federation didn't get better because it can't. Because it has to have this conflict again.
Hashtag bureaucracy.
2372 or whenever Deep Space Nine deals with it.
Yeah.
So it does come up at least in that one time. Like, they never really discuss it, the idea of genetic engineering and whatever, until Deep Space Nine addresses it in a weird way. in what would some would argue an unexpected way. And then from there, they go back and Enterprise later, like, has some episodes about it, where they, they introduce the idea that they're like the term augment actually, I think, comes from Enterprise.
Oh, wow.
Because they reveal the idea of like, oh, the people that descended from the original augments on Earth, they still exist. And,
right.
And it also, actually, that's where they also awkwardly tie Brent Spiner to it.
Oh, interesting.
So this is a spoiler for something that doesn't matter. We actually, if you've seen Picard season 2, that show ends with Noonien Sung, whatever, Noonien Singh, the 22nd century member of the Brent Spiner family. Like, he actually basically gives up on what he was doing. It's like, well, it's time for the Khan project. And like fucking opens he opens a drawer and it's got the Khan project, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, Enterprise had established his 22nd century descendant was still involved with juicing people. Because that becomes a whole thing where they basically tied, because the whole joke is that I guess Gene Roddenberry knew some dude named Noonien Singh. Really? So they named Khan Noonien Singh because he's like, oh, that's a cool name, right? And then when they made TNG, they're like, oh, Data was made by Noonien Sung, right? And so it was like, oh, we picked the same name. And eventually they went and tied those together. So basically the whole Data family has its origin in the eugenics war.
Well, cool. Something that kind of plays into episode 3.
It does, which is like a wild...
not coincidence.
3.
We can't say coincidence.
Oh, it's not a coincidence. Like they planned this shit, right?
Believe it or not.
It's
they
almost
weren't bringing
they had writers, right?
What?
Episode 3, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow.
Right.
A classic sci-fi time travel episode. Actually, someone made the joke like, "Why is this the first time that they found that title?" Like, like honestly, Star Trek has made so many episodes across 7 series. The fact that this is the first time someone was like, "No, let's call it Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow." Like, well, let's do that. That's good. Yes, and so the idea that we then tie it to that, and the character of Lahan Noonien Singh, who we know is descended from this family, the Noonien Singhs, most notably Khan.
Most famously,
I guess, most famously, infamously.
Yes.
So we see a story that actually doesn't focus on that until at the end they bring it into the story and essentially, kind of couch what if we killed baby Hitler?
Honestly, yeah.
Right? But in a way that makes it both personal and like, but I've seen the world without baby Hitler and it was bad. Like, actually that I think that was, for that episode, that was the one that shocked me. So, because we're not summarizing episodes, just the idea that it's like, hey, character who we know is descended from this person, but we haven't really talked about it much. Right. For you then to be faced with both the reality of, oh, here I am standing before my genetic progenitor or forebearer, right? This person who I know is basically Space Hitler.
Right.
And I realize not only he needs to exist because otherwise I don't, but also he needs to exist because I've seen the world where he doesn't.
Right. It's interesting.
It's a mess.
It's an interesting contrast to the season finale of season 1.
Right.
Right? Where they do a similar kind of thing, but really directly playing into an episode from the original series. But here they're actually kind of expanding, like doing something new, for lack of a better word, playing with the continuity in a new way. It's a fascinating episode and a lot of, but also really fun. Like it's despite being very dark, very lighthearted in a lot of ways.
Well, the time travel, like let's go back to contemporary or near contemporary Earth. Because I say that because like Star Trek has always gone to like, here's a place that's close enough, right?
Let's go to a place where perhaps they filmed this show for tax reasons.
Right.
Let's just say 2020 is Toronto. I don't know.
Although I really do love when they get there and Jim Kirk, who from this alternate timeline where Khan never existed and Earth sucks, he's like, "Oh, is this New York?" And she's got that look where she looks and literally sees the giant sign that says Ontario or Toronto. She looks and sees the giant sign that says Toronto. And it's like, no, man, we're in Toronto.
I was like, talk about the Kirk of it all, because that's a pretty fun kind of inside joke that's been developing, where this poor guy, this wonderful guy, who's maybe we should take some time to talk about this Kirk, because it's a really interesting and different in some ways Kirk than what we've seen represented on screen. Because I would say, as heretical as the Abrams movies are, they were very sort of slavish in their devotion to the bridge crew in how they're being portrayed. And
yes, although I think I've said this before, I disagree with respect to Kirk.
Interesting.
Because I actually think they actually missed their Kirk.
Sure.
I always think back to the first movie with the Kobayashi Maru, where they have him being arrogant.
Right.
And being like, haha, like eating an apple while, oh, don't worry, it'll take care of itself.
Right.
Where that wasn't
what
the
happened.
Kirk.
Yeah.
Like, he may be arrogant in his old age, but he that wasn't him when he was young. And that's actually, I give them a pass because of the only character that's like substantively different because of their time nonsense is Kirk. So it's like, oh, this is actually just a different Kirk.
Sure.
Whereas Paul Wesley, the fellow that plays Kirk in Strange New Worlds. First of all, I love the fact that he's now on his second appearance and he's still playing alternate reality Kirk. I mean, if this is the gag that he's going to appear as Kirk in all these episodes, but never have a real performance as Prime Kirk, right?
Right.
That's fine. It's hilarious. But actually, I more so in this episode than the previous, I actually really liked him. I thought he was fine in the previous episode.
He didn't have a whole lot to do aside from just being kind of a mulligan.
Well, being kind of an aggressor, like, oh, hey, Pike, you're so dumb, you know. That's what he did in first season, right? Where this episode, I find that he, like, understanding he's from a different reality, he's from a world where things were very different. He has moments where, like, to me, it captures some, like, understanding that Kirk as a character was written in the 60s where, yes, you made out with a girl every week. That's how Westerns were, right?
Right. Oh, shit, I've been doing mine wrong the entire time.
I know, right? Long John needs more making out with girls.
More kissing.
And more wide fist punching.
Well, you're in luck. Wait
till book 5.
Book 6, the final series. It's nothing but kissing and wide punching.
But I found that I thought, like, it was a take that I actually really liked because it had some of the things that to me are Kirk, right? Like, yeah, he is charming. Yeah, he's fucking smooth as butter, but he's also like a quick thinker. But he also he has excitement and joy about things. Like the realization, he's like, oh wow, I'm on Earth. This place I only know about through, I mean, basically fairy tales.
Honestly, yeah, it's great.
It's like the excitement about the hot dog.
Yeah,
especially now that I know that he apparently is Paul Wesley's a vegan.
Oh no.
So the idea that, like, oh, that was not a real hot dog.
But didn't he also? I can't remember in that episode. Doesn't he also like talk about a sunset or a sunrise or something like that? Or am I making shit up?
It could be.
Something like that.
I was actually thinking of the car heist because my brain thought of like, oh, actually, I actually thought of the 2007, 2009 Star Trek
Kelvin
where
movies? Yeah.
he boosted a car as a kid.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that makes sense. Except, oh wait, that didn't happen either, right? Like that's two realities away. I'm actually surprised they didn't actually license the Beastie Boys Sabotage. I'm gonna say it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I think it's an interesting casting choice because he's so physically different from the Kirks we've seen before. He's more lithe. He's less physically imposing. But as you said, what that does, I think, is it emphasizes his charm. It emphasizes his intelligence and his wit. That is in no short supply, because this is a Kirk that you can clearly see as someone that for lack of a better word, is a diplomat, even though he's kind of a rogue diplomat in a lot of ways. Like he can get stuff done. Bit of a cowboy. Right? Yeah, right? Yeah, but in a Starfleet kind of way.
Yeah, and I want to like make it very clear that that's something that the character's always had.
For sure.
So like it's not. Because I just want to give him props of being like, hey, you're getting a flavor of the character really, really right. And actually, I watched his interview on the Will Wheaton show where he actually talks about that. Like
is it Talking Trek? What is it called?
It's called The Ready Room.
Oh, right, that makes more sense.
But he talks about how as a kid he actually watched Star Trek a lot.
Oh, cool.
And he's actually, I think, our age. So he started with the original series.
Or younger.
No, I think he's actually our age.
Okay, I'm okay with
40 years, so he's a little bit younger. Yeah, Pavel Tomas Wazolewski.
Nailed it.
Paul Wesley. I do love that his first name is actually Pavel. Or Paweł? It's a Polish name. His family's from Poland.
There we go.
So yeah, I actually think he captures that kind of the charm and the intellect and the I figured this stuff out.
I think just the casting emphasizes that aspect of his character more.
More so. That's fair.
Right, because obviously there's this is all the meta quality, the behind the scenes stuff that we know about, William Shatner of like wanting to emphasize his physique. So, he had the built-in girdle and whatnot.
What I was to say, whilst wearing a girdle, right?
Right. And then Chris Pine is just kind of, a fine actor in his own right, but also very, very pretty. Very pretty, right? And this guy, I'm not saying he's not, but he's definitely in a different mold. And it's actually really refreshing to see. And has us thinking about, and like you said, like it's expressing the same Kirk, but because he's breaking the expectation just in terms of aesthetic to a marginal degree, we get to see more of who Kirk actually is without actually breaking character, and it's awesome. It's great.
Yeah, and of course the butthurt fanboys out there can just say like, oh, it's an alternate universe, but like. I do think, the one thing I will actually say, the weird fan-made Star Trek shows really sold me on the idea. Because in the fan-made shows, they have the guy that owns the set tour in upstate New York, he actually, he played Kirk in their fan shows. And his argument was always like, well, look, it's not the same people but it's like Shakespeare, right? Different people play the same characters in different ways. And I didn't really think hard about that until, I think really Discovery cast really started leaning into casting. Right. They had Ethan Peck as Spock, right? And then Anson Mount as Pike, which, Jeffrey Hunter played it for a hot second. But just the idea that like, we could see people playing the same character in different ways, right? But also in similar ways. Which speaks to
what I was trying to elucidate earlier with the Abrams movies. It's like I feel like, and I feel really shitty for saying this, but like I felt like a lot of those castings they were leaning into maybe more impressions. Like these are the same characters from before. And maybe as the movies went forward, they got to put more of their own personal spin on these characters, but. It reminds me of like and again, I'm not disparaging him at all, but like the casting of Brandon Routh as Superman, like part of the whole appeal was like, this dude looks like Christopher Reeve, right? Like we're gonna make it, and he is the Christopher Reeve Superman, right?
Right.
Whereas I feel like with I would guess
Paul
Discovery
Wesley
and this show, it's
doesn't
like,
look
okay, no, these are the same characters, but they're not. It's not this guy playing the Leonard Nimoy version of Spock, right? It's this guy playing Spock, and that's great, and it works, and it really shows a confidence in the material, which again is surprising that they're canceling and erasing a show from the network, but that's a different story. It's working, right?
I agree, and actually, I do hope that at least for some people, this helps them develop an appreciation for. Well, you may like certain Spocks in different ways, or certain Kirks, or certain Pikes, I guess, or Una Chin Rileys. I mean, for the people that really loved Majel Barrett's performance. Actually, Chapel's another great example.
Chapel's great
because she actually had a substantive amount of part in the original series. Unlike most of the other people, right? She actually appears in quite a lot of episodes. It's a different performance. It's a different. It actually feels a bit like a different character at times because we're seeing a younger Chapel in apparently her fucking juice and drugs and punching people part of life.
And Spock is into it.
The original series had that they had a relation or like a weird thing, but man, you know what Majel Barrett never did as Nurse Chapel? Fucking beat the shit out of people, right? Like she didn't, which. In retrospect, maybe she should have, like maybe it's just like, or she's just like, damn, I've had a fucking life. Actually, what I will say in defense of Majel Barrett's Chapel, in Star Trek 4, she appears at Starfleet Command as Captain Chapel or something, right?
Dope.
And it's just her fucking yelling at someone.
Yeah.
Like, no, we need that bloody blah. But yeah, no, that is the Chapel that juiced up and punched the shit out of people in a.
The problem is, I wouldn't be able to see Majel Barrett as anyone other than Troy's mom. And like, I mean, the horny, but just the horniest person in the universe.
Oh, I know. Yes, yeah, yeah. So I think, like, again, different people playing the part in different ways with different emphases. And that's to me what I'm getting to appreciate more about the show.
Sure, yeah.
Because I'm liking it. Like, even when a character doesn't behave in the way I expect, they like at no point has Ethan Peck's Spock made me feel off. I know some people are like, "Oh, that's not Spock." I'm like, actually, no, man. I've seen a lot of Star Trek. This is a very young Spock who's still dealing with, being a baby human,
the first couple episodes of season 1, let's just say this, there's the chest hair problem. Where in the first couple, I think the first episode we see him without his shirt, he's bare chested, and then later in the season, he's just letting it all go. Like, make a choice, my dude.
Oh, is it? Well, I mean,
that's all I'm saying.
I'm saying, like, so the one time Leonard Nimoy was topless, he was actually had quite a hairy chest. It may very well be that a young Spock thought, like, oh, humans are all hairless, right? So I have to shave, right? And then someone was like, no, my dude, no, that's okay. Please stop shaving.
Please.
He's like, okay, I will.
Hashtag Hirsute Spock.
You're right. I guess in that first episode he is hairless.
Yeah, he is a baby's bottom.
Oh, okay. So you apparently you were. I mean, or in the alternative, Spock feeling like he doesn't fit in with humans, like invests in Ferengi chest hair cream. Like, oh, I hear this really helps grow the hair out.
Quark told me this would make me more attractive to the females.
I say that, the Federation doesn't know who the Ferengi are, but whatever, right? Like, he gets this Ferengi chest hair cream.
Right.
Thinking it'll make him more virile, right?
What I like about this Spock as well is, like, it's clear the actor has, like, probably naturally, like, wavy hair. And they are working so hard to make that bowl cut just straight, but his hair is fighting it tooth and nail. But actually, the last thing I want to talk about here, and we wanted to kind of make this a shorter episode, but we were talking about Star Trek, so oops. The new character, Pelia? I can't remember how they... Pelia. Carol Kane. The Princess Bride's own Carol Kane.
I was thinking... My first experience really was actually Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's funny because like I was watching that first episode with my wife. I'm like, she's like, I know her. Why do I see her like living in a cave? I'm like, oh, let me look her up on IMDb. I'm like, that is the lady from The Princess Bride. That's wow, good pull, Nicole. And that's unfortunately it's kind of ruined the character for her because that's all she can see, and that combined with the weird accent she's given the character is not helping. But she's also delightful, which makes it a wonderful kind of
I think she's
mystery.
great. I love her. I think it's a weird. They introduced a new species, the lanthanites. And it's funny because it's like, a very old people that have been hiding out on Earth for generations. I was like, wait, is this another Guinan? Like, no, it's like the weird, like shady version. Like it's because they're not Elorians. That's Guinan's people. Like it's a very different people. But like I love the fact that apparently Earth in the the X years, like whatever centuries, just had a bunch of different people that looked like humans just fucking hiding out.
Well, okay, so like, make this clear. Who else is hiding out amongst humans during the 20 XDX years?
Well, I mean, Guinan is on Earth, on and off. Obviously, we now have seen Pelia, who apparently ran the archaeology department, which was not, in fact, the archaeology department of a university, but just a shitty shop that she sells.
That's a good name for a shop. Let's be real here.
Let's see. I believe there's also there's some Vulcans on and off.
Okay.
That's Carbon Creek, I believe it's called. That's the Enterprise episode about some Vulcans hiding out just for a couple of years in the 50s. And undoubtedly, there's probably others. Wait, there's shouldn't mention that person. Well, I mean, people that kind of, I mean, there a lot of these. I mean, the Guinan kind of feels like a Time Lord. Anyway,
they are Time Lords. Yeah, let's be real.
But there's actually also actually around the same time there was who worked for the.
I can take off my headphones if you want for a second.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
I don't want to spoil whatever that Star Trek show it is I'm talking about. Picard season
You're doing a good job hiding it. I'm genuinely confused, but that's great.
Yeah. No, Picard season 2 reveals there's also someone else living on Earth.
Oh, is it a Q? It's a Q, isn't it?
No, it's not a Q.
It's not a Q. Okay,
although there's also Q apparently on and off living on Earth.
No, I thought we were done with him. Basically, I like when Q showed up on Deep Space Nine and they're like, we don't care. And I'm like, yes. Goodbye, Q.
So... yeah, apparently Earth is just a place to go if you're an alien.
Hey, there's a lot
now I wonder, like, man, once it gets to actually when you think about it, right? Like, technically, and actually, so here's the final thing I actually want to talk about is the way they address the timing of Star Trek. Okay. So I think it was Akiva Goldsman, who's one of the showrunners of Strange New Worlds, or one of the producers. Yeah. He actually talked about how Star Trek in his mind was always supposed to be contemporary. Like it was always intended to be our future.
Oh, sure.
And the idea that the original series set the eugenics war in 1992.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And it's like, oh, man, they've never really addressed the fact that never, like, it didn't happen.
Like they did Gene Roddenberry going like, we'll never get to 1992.
Right.
This will be fine.
And even if you go watch Star Trek 2, he says, the Botany Bay, lost in space, Earth year 1995. Oof. Right? This idea that, and even TNG opens with like, oh, here's the war tribunals of the whatever year. Mm-hmm. I think it's actually the 2070s there. But like the idea that like putting contemporary years on this stuff has always been a challenge. When Voyager does a time travel episode back to the modern day, they just basically ignore the eugenics war. They're like, oh, we're in LA, it's great, right? And then Picard season 2 does hey, we're in LA, it's fine. And no one says like, but what about the eugenics war? Like they don't, right? Yeah. And for them to finally just acknowledge like, hey man, guess what? We had a whole show whose premise was about a time war.
Yeah.
Where people are literally manipulating time. That was Enterprise for the first 3 seasons. Mm-hmm. Literally, that was the premise. And it was a bit of a mess. But whatever that was, it gives us the context now narratively to say, you know what? That's what it is. Like, guess what? People have been trying to fuck with this shit forever. Yeah. And as the villainous character in the episode says, hey, it almost feels like time is fighting back. This always has to happen, even if it gets delayed, and even if Khan becomes a Canadian. Right? That's why Ricardo Montalban played him with a Hoosier accent.
Oh, really?
Or Hoser accent. I'm sorry, I got my
no. Hoosiers is different. Yeah.
He plays it with a Hoser accent.
There we go.
Hoser.
Yeah. Maybe it's just been kind of like a game of telephone over time. It's not actually the eugenics war. 92 to 95. That's the age of grunge. Maybe they're actually what they were talking about is the Gen X war, and it's actually the war about Gen X music. I'm just saying. I figured it out.
Yeah. So, like, I actually appreciate that they threw it out there. It makes it work. It fits in the continuity. Like, I'm not here to be a fucking Star Trek continuity nerd, right? Because guess what? The original series didn't give a shit. So, nor did TNG, right? No one cares.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
They wing out numbers and facts and names, and right. It doesn't work. And but you still love the show. When Star Trek gets more wrapped around the axle about that stuff, is when it tends to actually like struggle. So it's like no, just like here's
right. It's
here's why it works. Yeah.
Well, it's when the fact that it was a show that was created in the '60s starts to kind of show, right?
Right.
Yeah, and so the best to kind of like either not to retcon it, but to recontextualize these incidents in a way that makes sense for the audience that they're writing for.
Right.
That's what matters, because it's all fiction. Guess what? It's even if it's supposed to be our future, it's still not, sadly, in a lot of ways, real.
Yeah, guess
gladly,
what?
In other ways.
The original series, the final episode, ended with a story about a woman who was upset because Starfleet wouldn't let her be a captain because she's a woman.
Oh, no.
That shit doesn't even fly anymore.
I don't know. We're kind of heading that direction a lot of ways. Sorry. Thank you, Supreme Court.
Say, by the way, that's actually my favorite, like, shitty, like, take on Star Trek was, like, when they did something that was just bad or dumb, and it's like, oh, but actually that works out because, and I always think of Star Trek Discovery in like the third episode. The captain looks at the engineer and says, "Don't you want to be remembered but with some of the greats like Einstein, Zefram Cochrane, Elon Musk?" Ooh. And in retrospect, it was like, ooh. But again, there's a really, because at the time he wasn't nearly as crazy, but also
wasn't visibly.
If you watch Discovery Season 1, that line actually makes a lot of sense given what they reveal about the person saying it.
There you go. So Star Trek always on
the
Star Trek edge of cultural interpretation.
Always inadvertently trying to fix their own mistakes.
Not to quote a different science fiction show, but so say we all. So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net. You're also able to post your comments on Facebook, I guess. Yep. Sorry. It's at the point where I'm just like, what? Yeah, on Facebook, and share your comments with, or engage in conversations with other listeners. You can find us on other social media as well. Specifically at the places where Andrew and I frequent, which means you can find me on Instagram at DeepBethelComics, and you can find Andrew on Mastodon at ProfoundDark at Dice.camp. While you're at our website, forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page, which you can find by clicking on the link in the corner that says YouTube. There you'll find this show simulcast in YouTube. If you are listening to us on YouTube, you may already be there. Please like and subscribe, or as the kids like to say, ring that bell. We use two types of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusae, the other is called District 4. Both written and performed by Kevin McLeod of the Clan McLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire. You can find his music at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 attribution license. If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use. What would help us out even more, though, would be to leave some sort of review. Whether a text review or using the proprietary metric will spread the word to new potential listeners of the magic of algorithms.
Algorithm. Oh, wait, no. We have a sound for that. Never mind. Algorithms.
A new challenger has entered the arena, Andrew.
What?
Yep. Threads? I belong to it. I don't even know what it's called. It's Meta. It's Facebook. Though they don't want to call it Facebook. It's Facebook's answer to Twitter, but they're calling it Instagram's answer to Twitter because stick with the brand that people don't hate quite as much yet. It's interesting. It's the next step in the Twitter model war, right? And let me just say this. I don't know, but the puns are great. I like making thread-based puns. It's so you're obviously on Mastodon. Did you ever do like any of the other or get involved with the other like startups, for lack of a better word, that popped up after Elon Musk's first sort of stab at destroying Twitter? Like, was it Co-host and...
Well, I know there's Blue Sky, which
Blue Sky, yeah, and Hive back then. But yeah, Blue Sky is kind of the other hot sort of take on Twitter right now, because isn't it actually created by former Twitter execs or admins or something like that?
Yes. I believe, what's his name? What's the
Jack?
former Twitter dude? Jack. I think he's involved with Blue Sky. Yeah.
But that's an invitation only at this point, correct?
Right.
Have you
and
been
honestly, I've heard a lot of... No, I've not been invited. I've heard a lot of discussion about the fact that it's just another, like, shitty flavor of the same garbage. In terms of, like, I've heard their end-user license agreement is just... It's like, oh, here's just another... Like, they can use your shit however they want, or whatever.
Just as shitty as before, but perhaps marginally less shitty as what exists now on Twitter. That's the other thing, like this whole thread thing. Like, one thing I'll give Thread is that they made it super easy. It's an offshoot of a pre-existing social media platform, which makes it really easy to sign up. Basically, if you haven't yet, it basically like, do you want to just log in with your Instagram account? You can import everything from over there, including all of the people that you follow on Instagram. I did this so you don't have to, dear listeners. It's certainly popular. People getting a lot of attention right now. Whether it's the Twitter killer or not, who knows? Only time will tell. And that's not something that...
The real Twitter killer is Elon Musk.
Elon Musk, yeah. But either way, it's kind of fun to see, especially with Blue Sky right now. That's getting, like I said, getting a lot of hype. And I feel like this Thread app came out of nowhere a little bit. Which is probably a smart model to kind of get people to pay attention. Either way, it doesn't seem that different, which doesn't necessarily correct the problems that Twitter had to begin with. So, I don't know. We'll see. It is all a dumpster fire. So, whether it's a Thread or whether it's Toot from Mastodon, or whether it's... I don't know what Blue Sky calls their posts. I know that Mastodon doesn't call them toots anymore, but they should. They should own that. They should step up and just own it.
Well, except Mastodon's not... And that's actually the big difference.
Right.
This is another episode topic, but Mastodon is not owned by anyone.
Right.
Well, the code, I think, is...
Is it a blockchain program?
No, it's just...
okay, good.
The idea that anyone can download it and set up their own Mastodon instance.
Mm-hmm. Which is kind of Blue Sky's thing a little bit too, if I understand. Like, you can have different hosts or something like that.
I think the idea that you have to get an invitation from Blue Sky leads me to believe that's not the case. But I'll do research.
You should do some research. Yeah, and we'll expect your correction next week. So until something else terrible happens to the social media landscape, dear listeners, I'm Dee Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast. I'm recording.
So am I. Let's respect our god, Gorbachev.
Ooh. Who do you think you are, Zangief?
I wrestle bears.
I do too sometimes, but I think we mean that in a different way.
That was definitely something that I realized the meaning after I said it. We're fucking old. Everything hurts. I've only got 2 hours sleep. I'm gonna fall asleep. You're listening to the 14th source for all geeky nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your favorite...
Are we?
Oh, and we are your 2 overeducated codependent nerd hosts. Bring you things... Toot me again. I ain't dead yet.
Toot.